Hello, my name is William Page, and this is for the Poetry Project. The question I want to try to tackle here today is just how radical was Leaves of Grass when it first appeared in 1855? It's easy for us to forget how revolutionary and alone Whitman was in his time. In the 21st century, Whitman's poems don't seem revolutionary because so much of modern poetry was impacted by Whitman and by the poets that he influenced. The question of Whitman's reputation in his lifetime is a complicated one, but I think the best way we can begin to understand his radical approach to his art is by looking at the popular poets who were his contemporaries. Whitman was born in 1819 and published the first edition of Leaves of Grass in 1855 at the age of 36. He printed the book himself and made 795 copies. Most of the copies were given away, some to newspapers and literary men. Almost none of them sold. The two most popular poets of Whitman's day were Tennyson in England and Longfellow in America. And to give some contrast, Longfellow published his first poem at the age of 13, and Tennyson published his first poem at 16 and his first book of poems at 18. In the middle of the 19th century, the novel had not yet become the definitive storytelling form that it would become in the 20th century. There were great novelists in the 1850s. In America, for example, there was Melville, and in England there was Dickens. But poets could still be storytellers and write long poems that were popular. Tennyson's Idylls of the Kings, a long narrative poem on the legend of King Arthur, sold 10,000 copies in the first week of its publication. And Longfellow's The Song of Hiawatha, which was published in the same year as the first edition of Leaves of Grass, sold well and was popular among the general public. In 1885, a famous New York literary club named The Song of Hiawatha the most influential book of 1855. Even then, Whitman, who would have been 67 at the time, was not much thought of. Today, if you do a search on the internet for the popular books of 1855, the first entry will almost always be Leaves of Grass. So this is what readers of poetry expected in 1855. This is from the Song of Hiawatha. Down a narrow pass they wandered, where a brooklet led them onward, where the trail of deer and bison marked the soft mud on the margin. And this is a stanza from one of Tennyson's most popular poems, The Lady of Shalott. On either side the river lie, long fields of barley and of rye, that clothe the Wat and meet the sky, and through the fields the road runs by in many-towered Camelot. Now this is what Whitman gave them. This is from Song of Myself. The butcher boy puts on his killing clothes or sharpens his knife at the stall in the market. I loiter, enjoying his repartee and his shuffle and breakdown. Black smiths with grind and hairy chest environ the anvil. Each has his main sledge. They are all out. There is a great heat in the fire. From the cinder-strewed threshold I follow their movements. The lithe sheer of their waist plays even with their massive arms. Overhand the hammers swing, overhand so slow, overhand so sure. They do not hasten. Each man hits in his place. Many critics refuse to admit that Whitman's book was even poetry. The only reason that Leaves of Grass was reviewed at all was because Whitman himself sent copies to some of the major newspapers. The reviews were almost all bad. The New York Times said, "The author of Leaves of Grass roots like a pig among the garbage of his licentious thoughts." The Boston Intelligencer said, "The author should be kicked from all decent society as below the level of a brute. There is no wit or method in his disjointed babblings. It seems to us that he must be some escaped lunatic raving in pitiful delirium. Besides the newspaper, Whitman sent his book to some of the prominent literary men of the period. A few recognized it, in particular Ralph Waldo Emerson, who wrote back to Whitman, "Dear Sir, I am not blind to the worth of the wonderful gift of Leaves of Grass. I find it the most extraordinary piece of wit and wisdom America has yet contributed. I am very happy in reading it. I give you joy of your free and brave thought. I have great joy in it. I find incomparable things said incomparably well as they must be. I find the courage of treatment which so delights us, and which large perception can only inspire." But even Emerson's endorsement was not enough to keep Whitman's book from being banned in Boston and being ignored most everywhere else. Still, Emerson was someone Whitman admired, someone who inspired him. So it must have meant a lot to Whitman to have his good words.